I was in the morgue that night when they unzipped the body bag. What I saw when they revealed Elvis Presley still terrifies me. The body wasn't his, not the Elvis we all knew. It was a perfect imitation, but something was deeply wrong. I've kept this secret for years, but now it's time to tell you what really happened that night. Trust me, you're not going to believe it. It was a quiet night at the morgue. Too quiet, really. I've worked enough late shifts to know when something feels off, but nothing prepared me for what was about to come. The phone rang, breaking the silence like a sudden crack in a glass window. Elvis Presley, they said. Get ready to receive him. Elvis, the king. The moment the name hit my ears, a weird unease washed over me. You'd think I'd be used to high-profile cases by now, but this was different. This wasn't just another body, it was Elvis. I've handled celebrities, politicians, and musicians, but there was something about this one that felt wrong from the start. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the way your body reacts before something bad happens. The body arrived shortly after. The moment that van rolled up, I knew something was off. It wasn't just a normal body, it was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. I was used to the formalities, to the routine, but this was different. The way they moved him, how they acted like there was no time to waste. It felt like they were trying to rush us, trying to cover up something. Something I wasn't supposed to know. They wheeled him into the cold room, and I followed, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. You get used to handling death, to seeing the lifeless bodies of people, but this felt different. This felt personal. Maybe it was because the world had just lost a legend. Maybe it was the weight of it all. The responsibility of preparing a body that belonged to someone iconic. But it was more than that. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that none of us were prepared for. I stood there, frozen for a moment, staring at the body bag. They unzipped it, and for a second, I thought I was imagining it. But then, the body was fully revealed, and that's when the first crack in my reality started to form. I saw the jumpsuit, the familiar gold, the sequins, the hair styled exactly how it was in his famous performances. It looked like Elvis, all right, but something about it felt wrong. The body, his body, looked too perfect, too preserved. It didn't make sense. I've seen death before. I've seen how it changes people, how it alters their features, sometimes beyond recognition. But this wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. It was like they had done everything they could to make sure that body looked exactly like Elvis Presley. Too exactly. I took a step closer, trying to breathe normally, trying to act like this was just another body to prep. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't looking at the real Elvis. That wasn't just paranoia. It was something much darker, something deeper. Something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I knew one thing for sure. I needed to get to the bottom of this. I had to get closer. I couldn't help it. Something about that body, lying there in front of me, made it impossible to walk away. I'd seen enough death in my years of working the morgue to know when something wasn't right. But this was different. Every time I moved closer, I could feel my pulse racing. I was supposed to be focused, just doing my job, but my thoughts kept circling back to that feeling I had when I first saw him. There was no escaping it. The body was perfectly still, too still. like someone had taken great care to ensure nothing had moved. Nothing had shifted. The jumpsuit, pristine and too tightly pressed, seemed out of place in the cold, sterile environment of the morgue. It looked like a costume, like they had dressed up a mannequin trying to pass it off as the king himself. But I wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. I needed to see more. I had to. The staff was already moving around, taking their usual positions. Everything felt like a well-rehearsed routine. No one was questioning the identity of the body. No one except me. I had to swallow my doubts. But my hands were shaking as I prepared to do the unthinkable. Unzip the body bag. I couldn't believe I was the one tasked with this. Unzipping the bag that held the most iconic celebrity death in history. "Let's get this over with," I muttered under my breath. I couldn't wait any longer. With a deep breath, I pulled the zipper down, slowly, trying to keep my nerves in check. The bag opened, and I froze for a second. My eyes locked onto the body. The first thing I noticed was the face, the perfect features. Too perfect. His eyes were wide open, unnaturally so. They were fixed in place, staring at me like they were expecting something. I had to look away. I told myself it was just the lighting, maybe even the shock of seeing such an iconic figure dead. But the longer I looked, the more I realized this wasn't Elvis. It was his face, yes, but something was wrong. The skin was too smooth, too flawless. There was no sign of age or wear, no trace of the years Elvis had lived through, the countless nights on stage, the toll that fame and addiction had taken on him, his hands. I don't know why I noticed them first, but I did. They were almost too soft, almost like they'd been preserved in some way. I've seen enough bodies to know how decomposition works, how the skin starts to break down, how the hands, the fingers begin to shrivel, to lose their once pristine appearance. But these hands, these were perfect. No age spots, no signs of time. Just a trick of the light, I whispered to myself, trying to calm my racing mind. But it didn't help. I knew what I was seeing. And it wasn't the Elvis I had grown up watching on TV, the one who was constantly battling his demons. This was a version of him that had been carefully crafted. Too precise. My eyes drifted down to his body. The jumpsuit, gold, sequined, and perfect, was far too clean, far too stiff. Every crease, every line, every part of the fabric screamed costume. No one would wear this for hours on stage, sweat pouring out of them only to have it stay so crisp. That suit was not from a performance. It was a replica. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't a body that had lived through the struggles of fame. This was a body meant to be shown to the world. Immaculate, untarnished, and entirely fake. I stepped back, trying to steady my breathing. My stomach turned. This wasn't right. It couldn't be. But there was no one else to turn to. No one else who seemed to feel the way I did. The staff, they were moving with mechanical precision, carrying out their duties like it was any other night. But it wasn't any other night. It was Elvis Presley. As I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, I felt this overwhelming sense of isolation. I was alone with the body, alone with the truth I couldn't yet speak. I needed answers. But everyone else seemed to want to pretend it wasn't happening. I reached for the body again, this time more cautiously. My hands were cold, but I couldn't stop. Something in my gut told me to check his wrist, where he used to wear a watch. The real Elvis had been seen countless times with his signature piece. It wasn't there. There was no mark on the skin, no indentation where the watch had been. It was as if that part of him had been erased. My thoughts raced. Had they replaced him with someone else? No, I told myself. That would be insane. But the longer I stared at him, the more I realized this wasn't a coincidence. Someone had gone to insane lengths to make sure this body looked like Elvis Presley. It was like they were trying to create the perfect version of him, as if his legacy needed to be preserved. Not in death, but in appearance. I backed away slowly, the weight of what I was thinking pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just another celebrity death. This was a cover-up, a carefully constructed lie, and I was standing in the middle of it. As I walked out of the room, my mind raced. Who would do this? Why would they go to such extremes? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was in too deep. There was no turning back. But what I didn't know yet, what I hadn't realized, was that the worst was still to come. The more I looked, the more I felt like I was seeing a lie staring back at me. A carefully curated version of Elvis Presley, dressed up for a public that would never get the chance to see the real man again. But why? Why had they gone to such lengths to hide the truth? And why was I the only one who seemed to notice? As I stared at the body, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold room. It crept into my bones, settled in my stomach, and wouldn't let go. This wasn't just about a celebrity death anymore. This was something darker. Someone was hiding something, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what it was. I tried to focus, to get back to the task at hand. I was supposed to be working, prepping the body, taking notes, documenting every detail. But the more I looked, the more it felt like I was getting drawn into a twisted riddle with no answers. The body in front of me was not just Elvis. It was something else entirely. A thing made to resemble the king of rock and roll, but not him. I ran my fingers over his clothes again, feeling the cold fabric of the jumpsuit that looked like something straight out of a costume shop, not the sweat-soaked, worn-out piece of clothing Elvis had actually worn. The stitching was pristine, the sequins still glimmering as if they had never been touched by the harsh lights of a stage. I'd seen real costumes before, clothes that had been worn by performers night after night. This was too perfect. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. Maybe it was just the pressure of being in a room with such a famous figure, surrounded by the weight of his legacy. But that voice in my head, the one telling me to pay attention, was louder than ever. My eyes drifted down to the body's hands. I had already noticed the smoothness of the skin, but now I saw the fingers more clearly. There was no sign of wear. No calluses, no signs of age. Not even the faintest hint of a ring mark where Elvis had worn his jewelry. His hands were almost too delicate, too fine for a man who had lived the kind of life Elvis had. Those hands should have told a story, but instead, they looked like they belonged to someone else. Someone younger. Someone who hadn't lived the rough life Elvis had led. A sense of unease washed over me, and my hands began to tremble as I reached for the body once more. I had to see more. I had to understand. I pushed the sleeves up carefully, trying not to disturb anything too much. As I lifted the fabric, I froze. There, just under his wrist, was a mark that shouldn't have been there. The skin was too smooth. There were no creases, no signs of time, but more importantly, there was a discoloration, a faint, almost invisible trace of where something had been removed. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it was something I couldn't ignore. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. I had seen it, the smallest of details, but it was enough. It was enough to send my mind spiraling, trying to piece together what was happening. How could I have missed it before? It was like a clue, but a clue to what? Was this body, this thing, a replacement for the real Elvis? Number. That couldn't be right. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. They'd gone through too much trouble to make this body look like him. But why? Was this some sort of sick joke? A cruel prank? Or was it something much darker than that? I looked around the room. It was eerily quiet, as if the morgue was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt like I was being watched. Like someone was standing just behind me, waiting for me to find the truth. But who? And what would happen if I did? I shook my head again, trying to clear the fog. My thoughts were racing, too fast to keep up with. I needed answers. But every time I tried to focus on one question, a dozen more popped into my head. Why the secrecy? Why the cover-up? Was there something in Elvis's life that needed to stay hidden? Something the world could never know? I moved back to the body, my mind spinning with these thoughts. I needed to check his face again. I had been avoiding it, focusing on the hands, the body, the jumpsuit. But now I had to face it. I had to see if there was anything more I was missing. As I looked at his face once again, the unnatural smoothness of his skin struck me. It looked almost too perfect, too flawless, like someone had made him out of plaster, sculpted every feature with painstaking detail. The lips were sealed in a perfect line, the eyelids wide open, frozen in a way that made the whole thing feel more like a doll than a human. There was no sign of the life that had once filled those eyes, no trace of the energy that had made Elvis Presley a star. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a body, it was an imitation, a mockery of the man who had once lived and breathed in front of millions of fans. Someone had replaced him. But why? And how? I felt the walls of the room close in on me. There was no escape from what I was seeing, no turning back. I had to know the truth. And the deeper I went, the more terrified I became. Because the truth, I realized, wasn't just about Elvis. It was about something much, much bigger. Something I wasn't ready to face. I took one last look at the body before I left the room. The questions were piling up faster than I could answer them. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be able to forget what I'd seen. And neither was anyone else. The days after that night were a blur. I tried to go about my work like everything was normal, but it felt impossible. The body, Elvis, whoever it was, kept haunting me. I couldn't shake the image of that lifeless face, too perfect, too still, staring back at me. Every time I saw a picture of Elvis in the media, my mind flashed back to the morgue, and I could feel my stomach churn. I had seen something no one else would ever know. I knew the truth, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. I couldn't get past the nagging feeling that I was involved in something much bigger than me. Something dangerous. It wasn't just a celebrity death. It was a lie, a huge lie, and I was standing at the center of it. But no one else seemed to notice or care. The staff moved about the morgue as if nothing had changed, as if everything was just routine. I tried to push it out of my mind. I had to. But the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the questions became. Why was I the only one who seemed to see the cracks in the story? Why was everyone acting like the body that had been brought in was Elvis Presley, when it so clearly wasn't? I remember the first time I really asked someone, one of the guys who'd been on shift that night, someone I'd worked with for years. I couldn't help myself. "Are we sure that was Elvis?" I asked casually, hoping to get a definitive answer or even a hint of concern. But he just looked at me as if I were insane and shrugged. "It's Elvis." "What do you mean?" he said, his voice flat, dismissive. I didn't push it any further, but it ate at me. Elvis, the king, the man who'd been immortalized in music and legend. But I was starting to wonder if he had ever been anything more than an image, a construct, something that was being preserved long after his death. Who had created this illusion, and why? The more I thought about it, the more the questions circled, the more my doubt grew. I couldn't stop thinking about the body, about the way it had been treated, the flawless skin, the lifeless eyes, the perfect hair. None of it added up. It didn't match the Elvis I knew from the documentaries, from the interviews. It didn't match the man who'd been known for his flaws, his addiction, his tragic end. It was like someone had removed all the humanity from him and left behind only the image, the legend. But no one else seemed bothered by it. They just went about their business, like it was any other body. It was driving me crazy. I needed someone to acknowledge it, to confirm what I was seeing. But everyone was too busy, too distant, too caught up in their own routines to see the bigger picture. And so, I did what I had to do. I tried to convince myself that I was just tired, that I was overthinking it. After all, I had been working long shifts, and maybe I was letting the stress get to me. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But that didn't make the fear go away. And the more I thought about it, the more the fear grew. Because deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I walked into the morgue again, a few days after that night. I told myself I was just checking in on routine things, trying to stay grounded. But when I stood in front of the table, when I looked at that body again, the same doubt filled me. This wasn't Elvis. It wasn't even close. I tried to stay calm. I stepped back. Number, I was being ridiculous. It had to be him. I told myself it was just the exhaustion messing with my head. I had been working nonstop, and my mind was probably just grasping at straws. That had to be it. But then came the moment when everything changed. The one thing I had been avoiding, the thing I'd tried not to think about, happened. I was standing by the table, staring at the body, when one of the other workers came up beside me. He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking down at the body too. It was the first time anyone had really acknowledged the strangeness of the situation. "Crazy, isn't it?" he said quietly. "The whole world is going to believe this is Elvis. But you and I both know it isn't." The words hit me like a slap to the face. He knew. He had seen it too. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. There was something wrong with that body. Something wrong with the story they were feeding us. But then, Just as quickly as he had spoken, he looked around nervously. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "Don't ask too many questions," he whispered. "It's better if you just keep your head down and keep working. Trust me on that." And with that, he was gone. Just like that. That was the moment when I realized the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. I wasn't just a witness to a strange body. I was a part of something I didn't understand. Something bigger than the morgue. Bigger than me. I had crossed the line. But what I didn't know was just how dangerous it would be to cross it. So I kept my head down. I did my work. I didn't ask any more questions. But the doubt didn't go away. The fear didn't go away. It only grew because deep down, I knew that I was standing on the edge of something much darker than I could have ever prepared for. But what I didn't know was that the worst was still to come. I could barely sleep that night. The thoughts kept swirling in my head, the unanswered questions gnawing at me like a persistent itch that wouldn't go away. That body, the one that was supposed to be Elvis, it haunted me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that something was deeply wrong. And the deeper I dug into my thoughts, the more I began to understand. I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just about Elvis anymore. It was about the truth. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I passed someone in the hall or glanced at my colleagues, I could sense their eyes on me. It was a strange feeling, like I was under a microscope, and everyone was waiting for me to slip up to say something I shouldn't. But the more I stayed quiet, the more the pressure built up inside of me. The morgue was eerily calm that day, almost too quiet. The usual bustle of staff moving in and out of rooms was absent. It felt like the place had become a tomb, sealed away from the rest of the world, and I was trapped inside it. I had to know. I had to find out if the body was really Elvis. The only way to do that was to investigate further. But the thought of being caught, of someone finding out what I was about to do, terrified me. I had to move carefully, like a thief in the night, searching for the truth. I waited until everyone had left for the day, until the morgue was empty, and I was alone. The silence felt suffocating as I walked back into the cold room. My footsteps echoed off the walls, amplifying my anxiety. Every inch of that room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to make my move. When I got to the table, I felt my pulse quicken. I knew I shouldn't be doing this. I knew it was dangerous, that I could be risking everything. But I couldn't stop myself. The questions kept bubbling up in my head, and I needed answers. I was already in too deep. So what did I have to lose? I approached the body again, but this time, I wasn't just looking. This time, I was searching. I ran my fingers along the body's arms, tracing the seams of the jumpsuit, my eyes darting from one detail to another. Everything had to be perfect. It had to be real. I had to prove to myself that what I was seeing wasn't some sick joke. And then I found it. There, just beneath the sleeve of the jumpsuit, was a mark. A faint, pale scar where a tattoo should have been. It was barely visible, but it was there. Elvis had been known for his tattoos. He had a well-documented one on his arm. But this was different. It was like someone had tried to erase it, to make sure it was hidden from anyone who would notice. But I had seen it, and I wasn't imagining things anymore. I pulled the sleeve up more carefully, my hand shaking as I examined it closely. The scar was too neat, too deliberate, as if someone had tried to remove it with precision. But why? Why would anyone go through the trouble of erasing such a personal detail from his body? It hit me. The tattoo was gone, and this body, this thing lying in front of me, wasn't Elvis. The realization crashed into me like a freight train. It wasn't just a body that was being passed off as Elvis. Someone had intentionally altered it. They had done everything they could to make sure that no one would be able to tell the difference. I stood frozen for a moment, the gravity of the situation finally hitting me. The questions that had been swirling in my head now had answers, but they only led to more questions. Why would anyone go to such lengths to replace Elvis? What was the point of faking his death so meticulously? And, perhaps most terrifying of all, who was behind it? The body in front of me wasn't just an impersonation. It was a lie. A lie that had been crafted with meticulous care, and I had stumbled onto it. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me, suffocating me. There was no escaping this now. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had uncovered something, but I had no idea what to do with it. What if I was wrong? What if my mind was just playing tricks on me? But no, deep down, I knew what I had seen. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. I stood there for a long time, the questions piling up faster than I could process them. Who could do something like this? Who had the power, the resources to pull off such a massive deception? And why? What was the real reason behind it?
I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell someone, anyone. But as I thought about it, I realized that revealing the truth would change everything. It would unravel the lies that had been carefully constructed, and I would be the one to expose it. But who would believe me? What would they do to me if I spoke out?
I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just walk away from the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. But I also knew that I was in too deep now. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and there was no going back. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was standing on the edge of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. I turned and walked out of the room, but I knew that I would never be able to forget what I had just discovered. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the worst was yet to come. The weight of the secret was starting to crush me. I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I had to know what was going on. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was tangled in something far bigger than myself. And no matter how hard I tried to push it out of my mind, it kept coming back, gnawing at me. The truth was there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I couldn't hold it in. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal when I knew what I knew. So I decided to confront someone. I couldn't do this alone. I needed answers, even if it meant putting everything at risk. I waited until the morgue was mostly empty. It was late, and the place felt like a ghost town. I had already made up my mind, and there was no turning back. I walked straight to the senior staff member I trusted most. He'd been there longer than anyone, and if anyone knew what was going on, it was him. I found him in the break room, sipping coffee and reading through some paperwork. His face didn't look up as I walked in, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Something was off. Something about him had changed since the night I first asked about the body. He looked wary,
"I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about Elvis."
His head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Something that wasn't just routine. It was fear. "You've been asking too many questions," he muttered, setting the coffee cup down. "What's going on in that head of yours?"
"I'm not crazy," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "I know what I saw. The body, it wasn't Elvis. I know it wasn't, and I need to know why." He sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face like he was trying to figure out how to handle me. For a moment, he didn't say anything. I could feel the tension building in the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and almost reluctant.
"Listen, kid," he said, his tone a warning. "You don't want to get involved in this. You really don't." "What do you mean?" I pressed. "What's going on? Why are you hiding the truth?" He looked at me then, his eyes hard. "There's a lot you don't understand. A lot you're better off not knowing. The body you saw, it wasn't meant to be public. But what's done is done, and now we can't undo it. You're not the first person to notice something's off, but you're the first one who's been stupid enough to keep asking questions. Why? What happened?" I was getting desperate now, but the more he said, the more I felt like I was slipping deeper into something I had no control over. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Elvis isn't dead, all right. Not the way you think. What you saw in that morgue wasn't a body that had been left to decay. It was a replacement." He paused, watching my reaction. The world wasn't supposed to know. He didn't want to be the king anymore. He faked his death. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything I had thought was a lie. The world had been sold a story, and I had just uncovered the truth behind it. Elvis Presley, the icon, the legend, wasn't dead. He'd staged his death, and the body in front of me was just a stand-in.
"But why?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. "Why go to all this trouble?"
He sighed again, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. The man was tired, all right? He was done with the spotlight. He couldn't stand it anymore. But he couldn't just disappear. Not without causing a scandal. Not without destroying the image he'd spent his life building. So they faked it. Made sure his death was as believable as possible. I was in shock. So, the body I saw, it wasn't Elvis at all? "No," he said quietly. "It was someone else. Someone who looked like him. A perfect replacement. But the real Elvis? He's out there somewhere, living a life he couldn't live while the world thought he was dead." The weight of it all crashed down on me, and I took a step back, trying to process it. I had known there was something wrong, but I never imagined it was something this huge. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a masterpiece of deception.
"You can't tell anyone about this," the senior staff member warned, his voice hard again. "You don't realize how dangerous this is. People have been trying to keep this secret for years, and they'll do anything to protect it. Anything."
I could see the fear in his eyes now, and it made me even more scared. The more I knew, the more dangerous it became. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I had stumbled onto something I couldn't escape from. "I won't say anything," I said, the words feeling like a lie even as I said them. but I wasn't sure I had a choice. He nodded, looking relieved for a moment, then stood up. Good. Now forget everything you think you know. Forget it and walk away. I left the break room, my mind reeling with the truth I had just uncovered. There was no turning back. I was too deep in this mess now. But what I didn't know was how much deeper I would be dragged and how much I would lose in the process. The silence that followed that conversation with the senior staff member felt suffocating. It was like a heavy weight settled on my chest, pushing down, making it harder to breathe. I had the truth now, but with it came a burden I didn't know how to carry. I walked out of the break room, my mind spinning, trying to process everything. I knew the world had been fed a lie, but I was too deep in it to find an easy way out. The secret was too big, too dangerous. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let it go, no matter how much I wanted to. The next few days at the morgue felt like I was living in a fog. My colleagues carried on like nothing had changed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking around with a scar no one could see. Every time I glanced at someone, I felt like they knew. Like they could tell that I knew the truth, that I was privy to a secret that could tear everything apart. I tried to focus on my work, but it wasn't easy. Every time I picked up a new body, I found myself staring at it for longer than I should, wondering, was this one real? Was this one a fake too? How many more were out there, hidden from the public? Was I the only one who had ever seen the truth? The questions kept coming, and no matter how hard I tried to push them away, they never left. It wasn't just the fear of what I had uncovered that haunted me. It was the silence, the fact that no one was talking about it, the way everything was swept under the rug, like nothing had happened. It was like the world had decided to forget, but I couldn't forget. I remember the first time I saw Elvis on TV after that conversation. It was a commercial for some retrospective concert, some tribute to the king. There he was, in all his glory, his image flashing across the screen. The face, the smile, the music playing in the background. It was everything the world knew and loved about him. But as I watched, a sick feeling twisted in my stomach, because I knew what had really happened. I knew who was really behind the curtain, pulling the strings. That night, I went to the morgue again, hoping the silence would ease my mind. Maybe I could find some peace if I just kept my head down and did my job. But the moment I stepped into the cold room, the truth hit me again. I could feel it, the weight of everything I knew pressing down on me. I looked at the table where Elvis had been. It was empty now. His body had been taken away, presumably to its final resting place, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could they have switched it again? Could they have replaced him with someone else to make sure no one knew? It was possible, and the more I thought about it, the more paranoid I became. Was anyone else out there who knew the truth? Was I the only one who had seen the real Elvis? The one who was still alive, hiding somewhere in the world? I felt like I was losing my mind. The questions were becoming a loop, an endless cycle that I couldn't escape. I kept thinking back to the senior staff member's warning. Forget everything you think you know. Those words rang in my ears every time I tried to make sense of it all. I wanted to believe him, to forget, but I couldn't. I had seen too much. And now, the more I tried to push it out of my mind, the more it consumed me. The longer I stayed in the morgue, the more I realized how alone I was. No one else seemed to care. No one else seemed to notice what I had noticed. The staff went about their business, processing bodies and handling the usual cases, but they never asked questions. They never looked too closely at what they were doing. They just followed orders like cogs in a machine, blind to the bigger picture. I didn't know what to do with the knowledge I had. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't trust anyone. The risk was too high and the consequences too severe. The more I tried to talk myself into staying quiet, the more I realized how dangerous this secret was. There was no escaping it now. I didn't sleep much after that. The silence in my head was louder than anything else. It was the kind of silence that consumes you, that keeps you up at night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elvis, his body, the fake one. I couldn't escape the image of it no matter how hard I tried. It was burned into my mind, and I didn't know how to move on. A few days later, I heard rumors circulating through the morgue. The higher-ups were getting nervous. They had started talking about the body again, about keeping things quiet. They were going to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. I couldn't help but feel like I was the only one who wasn't in on it. Everyone else was part of the lie. They were playing their part. But me? I was the one who had seen the truth. And now, I was stuck with it. I kept my head down after that. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't try to dig deeper. Because the more I learned, the more I realized this was bigger than me. I had uncovered something so huge, so dangerous, that I couldn't afford to speak out. So I stayed silent. And I wondered every day what I had gotten myself into. Final payoff. I'll never forget that night. The body I saw. The lie I uncovered. The world believes Elvis Presley died on that fateful day. But I know the truth. He faked his death. The body they brought in wasn't his. It was a replacement. Someone else, someone who looked just like him, was put in his place. And no one has ever questioned it. The truth, as heavy as it is, has haunted me for years. I'm the only one who knows what really happened. I'm the only one who saw what they were trying to hide, but I can't talk about it. I can't risk exposing the secret, because the moment I do, everything will change, and I'll lose everything. So I carry the weight of it, the knowledge, the truth, and I wonder every day what Elvis is doing now, where he's hiding, and if he'll ever come back.